On a quiet, sunny day, a young student walks by himself along a deserted road reading a little book. Another student riding a bicycle meets up and calls out his name, Yoshino, and informs him about taking his sister Aika home. Yoshino reminds him of the state of his grades as he cycles away and attempts to bid Aika farewell but gets a cold reception in response. Her brother Mahiro questions her about her cold attitude towards Yoshino, but she shuns him off and replies to him with harsh words about Yoshino. A strange barrel swept by the ocean finds its way to an island. The barrel moves suddenly and the lid comes off after several sounds. A lady comes out of the barrel panting as she gathers the strength to understand her situation. She mentions a name, Simone, and realizes his plan was for her to be stranded on an island with nothing but her sandals and clothes. After analyzing her situation and her inability to use her magic, she angrily yells out a self-eulogy, stating that her being Kusaribe Hakazi, the strongest mage in there, also protects her stomach. Yoshino reads aloud in his ongoing class, while some girls gossip about his looks and relationship, wondering if he's in a relationship. After the class, one of the school teachers engages Yoshino in a discussion about the sudden disappearance of his friend Fuwa Mahiro, who's also a student of the school, without due notification to the school authorities, but he walks away without a proper answer to the questions. Yoshino continues his day walking around the school and comes across some students. Yoshino heaves a sigh as one of the students calls his attention, reminding him of his loneliness. After a while, the students emerge from an alley, mocking Yoshino as they walk away with his wallet after bullying him, leaving him helpless with bloodstains. Yoshino heads to a funeral ground as he ponders Mahiro and his recent dealings. A female voice disrupts his thoughts, inquiring if he's Mahiro. Yoshino turns, and she introduces herself to him as Evangeline Yamamoto, asking him about his relationship with Mahiro. When he hears from him, Yoshino turns to give a reply, only to find Yamamoto pointing a gun to his face while he trembles in fear. Yamamoto continues by briefing Yoshino about an incident that occurred recently. That incident is somehow linked to Mahiro, as he saves a girl who was spotted in a certain area. Yoshino enlightens Yamamoto by explaining a possible reason for such an incident, as it could be linked to Mahir's sister's gravestone. He then recalls his last meeting with Mahiro by Aika's gravestone. As Mahiro expresses his anguish about his sister's death, Wandeno leads surface concerning the case. As even the police prove to be unproductive concerning the case, Mahiro resolves to find the murderer himself and get his revenge to be able to get the answers to the questions relating to the mysterious death of Aika. Yamamoto grabs Yoshino by the collar, pointing the gun even closer. Yoshino tries to think of an escape plan as a butterfly suddenly draws his attention. Yamamoto also becomes intrigued as a swarm of butterflies surrounds them. Yoshino uses the opportunity to grab his umbrella and use it to attack Yamamoto, but because he's unable to handle a proper defense, he ends up being thrown to the ground by Yamamoto. Yamamoto angrily pulls out another gun from her bag to shoot Yoshino, but Mahiro mysteriously appears from nowhere and attacks Yamamoto, sending her to the ground. Yoshino curiously asks how Mahiro landed there, but he gives a vague reply. Yoshino warns Mahiro as Yamamoto picks up her gun and fires a shot, but it bounces off as a strange barrier prevents it. Yamamoto confirms her suspicions about Mahiro meeting a mage and continues interrogating him. Mahiro furiously disrupts her interrogations by attacking her. A fight emerges between the two, but none of Yamamoto's shots hit him, so he decides to end the fight by hitting her head to the ground, which makes her unconscious. Yoshino runs after Mahiro, trying to understand the situation, and he notices an unconscious man by the stairs. Mahiro explains to Yoshino about the syndrome Yamamoto mentioned, the Black Iron Syndrome. While the old man falls and begins to metallicize into a statue, chaos arises in the city while Mahiro walks along the streets with Yoshino, explaining the syndrome as bodies of metallized citizens lay scattered on the streets. Mahiro admits to Yamamoto's claims of his possession of magic, as Mahiro relays to Yoshino how a group of people plan to gain more power by awakening something that would send destruction to the entire world. A strange group of people recites a repeated chant as they hold onto chains. Respectively, Yoshino finds himself believing Mahiro's explanations without any due suspicion. Mahiro informs Yoshino about the only person who's capable of ending such atrocity. Hakazi is an heiress. Mahiro pulls out a doll that is tied to Eris' neck as a voice suddenly resounds from it. Mahiro and Adesideze attack each other with words as she realizes he's with someone. A loud thud is heard from the ocean as Mahiro tries telling Hakazi about Yoshino, accompanied by more butterflies. Mahiro reports the situation to Hakazi as she instructs him to make another report with range to the sounds. Mahiro uses the opportunity to tell Yoshino about how he came across a bottle a month ago with a doll and a message instructing him to cut a deal only if he believes in magic, which resulted in him being in contact with Hakazi, a mage on an isolated island, and making a deal with her to assist her on the terms that she uses her magic to find Aika's killer. A hole appears from the middle of the ocean while Salmon and his members continue chanting, leading to a huge spherical object appearing, sticking chains from the hole into the sky. Mahiro, Yoshino, and Aika are walking to school when Aika suddenly stops Mahiro to ask a question about kissing, as she's inexperienced in such an area. But he shuns her because she's young, asking her to ask when the time is right. Yoshino curiously asks Mahiro about his refusal to give his sister attention, and Mahiro sternly tells Yoshino about his refusal to permit his sister to have a relationship and walks away. Yoshino suddenly receives an unexpected text about a kiss and attempts direction, surprisingly. Mahiro stops by a vending machine along a deserted road, hits the machine, and pops out a canned drink, and immediately offers one to Yoshino, but he declines. Yoshino goes over all Mahiro had unveiled to him, as he seems to be finding it hard to digest the information, but Mahiro assures him not to worry, as he'd save the world. He meant to use the fruit-like object that was being summoned into the sky and held by chains as part of the plot of the Kusare clan Lan, and Mahiro confirms his statement explaining the rest of the evil plot. But Hikaze interrupts their discussion with eye of not let warning against Tenang. Their plans happen. Mahiro unexpectedly asks Yoshino to accompany him to his house, where he grew up with Aika, and instructs Yoshino to open the gate after hearing Hikaze confirm her decision to help him track his killer. The Simonth make their way to a huge parlor, which turns bright immediately after they set foot into it. Hikaze instructs Mahiro to take all the talismans he possesses, and ends up choosing a knife. Yoshino picks one, as Mahiro enlightens about how the objects before him contain magic in it, which lasts after a few number of time, also made by Hikaze in the event of her inability to use magic, who hid them in places where members of her clan wouldn't be able to locate. Mahiro places the knife in a specific location, permitting Hikaze to cast the spell. A strange substance surrounds them suddenly as Hikaze informs Mahiro that it'd require some time to find the killer. Yoshino is reminded of the deal Mahiro had with Hikaze to help her in return for his revenge, which bothered him in some way. Yoshino informs Mahiro of his desire for him to stick with them and help him, but Mahiro refuses, reminding him that Yoshino should be with his girlfriend, while handing over some talismans to Yoshino to protect him from the syndrome. Mahiro advises Yoshino to be cautious, especially when he comes across butterflies suddenly. Mahiro asks Yoshino to introduce him to his girlfriend, after he returns to eliminate Aika's killer. Yoshino returns home as he begins to prepare to leave and decides to carry very few things to be able to move about easily. He tries to reach his guardian, but to no avail. Yoshino walks along a deserted road, wondering if the government has given up on Hisidi, as he doesn't seem to observe any form of understanding. Yoshino pauses as he notices the boys what he'd previously bullied him lying on the ground, as they had become statues, and bends over to pick his wallet, only for Yamamoto to appear hitting him from behind, and accusing of stealing from the corpses, as she holds him down by the neck. Yoshino suddenly recalls Mahiro's instructions regarding the talisman as he struggles to make contact with it. He suddenly imagines what ability he'd like to have as he suddenly develops the power to fight Yamamoto, but ends up picking her gun and running towards the direction of his school. Yoshino heads up to the school, realizing a lot of the students' dead bodies lying around as he tries to catch his breath. Windows, Mahiro's, shattered by gunshots. Yoshino crawls only to realize he has been found by Yamamoto. Mahiro bumps into a mage as he walks alone, communicating with Hikaze regarding his sister's killer. The strange man slowly questions Mapresent Out, his reason for not evacuating the city, and attacks him. Realizing Mahiro is linked to Hikaze, Hikaze sternly warns Mahiro not to fight the mage, as her intuition tells her it's Natsumura, a very powerful opponent. But Mahiro decides it only interests him even more to fight. Yamamoto moves around the school, calling out to Yoshino as she brings out a gaseous object from her bag. Yoshino changes his location to air, which leads Yamamoto to the roof. Yoshino appears from behind and shocks her by firing a shot that only hits the tank. Yamamoto realizes Yoshino's willingness to shoot her if need be, as he calmly walks closer to her and uses the opportunity to throw him off guard. Yoshino furiously lifts her as they both fall off a building, but he uses the magic to stop as he reaches the ground. Yamamoto trembles in shock, as Yoshino cuts a deal with Princess Sumura and reports back to Simone about Mahiro's identity as he instructs him to capture Mahiro alive. Yamamoto pauses while discussing with Yoshino as he uses the past tense when mentioning his friend, and she realizes Aika is the girlfriend Yoshino was referring to. Yoshino reminds Yamamoto of his refusal to get revenge, as he sees no relevance to such, but only desires to stick with Mahiro and help him. Natsumura confirms the source of Mahiro's power as he comes into contact with Ajik and attacks Mahiro, sending him to the ground. Mahiro suddenly flees from the fight, landing in a parking lot. As he rants to Hikaze about his fierce opponent, Hikaze reminds him of his foolish decision to take on a true mage in the first place and watch Han wear out. Mahiro notices a snack passed to him and realizes Yoshino is behind him. Yoshino comes with an excuse about his girlfriend scolding him for helping Mahiro, as Mahiro hungrily grabs the snack. Mahir instructs Yoshino to stay mute as Natsumura locates his werebrings, but Yoshino's bag ruins it all by hitting the ground, which draws Natsumura's attention. Natsumura notices Mahiro having an ally as they vanish again. Hikaze pleads with Mahiro to retreat, as battling Natsumura would not be reasonable, but Mahiro rants about his refusal to go away, as it'd only slow him down from finding his sister's killer. Yoshino tries to persuade Mahiro to fight, as their talismans are reducing, but he ignores him while focusing on picking up an object or defense. Mahiro hands over his doll to Yoshino, giving him a time limit to learn how to use magic from Hikaze while he attacks Natsumura. Mahiro foolishly attacks Natsumura on sight without any strategy, leaving Yoshino to report to Hikaze about Mahiro's movement. Hikaze assures Yoshino of the usefulness of their magic, as it has no offense, as Yoshin portrays Mahiro. Yoshino engages Hikaze in enlightening him about the details of their magic. Yoshino decides to help Mahiro out, as he realizes his friend could be in potential danger. Hikaze finishes her lecture on magic by mentioning the magic that her clan possesses courtesy of the Tree of Genesis, which is the deity of their clan, and mentions 2 vital instructions that would be useful to Yoshino about how their magic is used. Natsumura suddenly pulls away from the fight and lays his head on a car, chanting an incantation that causes immediate damage and sends Mahiro to the ground. Yoshino rushes into a mall on a quest to find an offering large enough to receive the true Genesis, as it's the only way out. Natsumura moves close to Mahiro as he rises feebly on the ground. Mahiro takes him off guard by grabbing his spear and repeatedly hitting him. Natsumura wonders if his opponent is aware of the damage his decision could cause him. Yoshino reaches a desolate place, but finds no signs of his friend. Mahiro's second talisman expires, as he finds it difficult to defeat Natsumura, so he decides to run into hiding for a while to gather strength, but suddenly remembers a memory of his sister, which leads him to pick up a gun and go after Natsumura, leaving his cell phone behind. Helicopters hover around the city as they begin their quarantine activities, starting with bombs. Yoshino continues to find Mahiro, as he inquires from Hikaze about any possibility of using their magic to resurrect a dead person, but she disagrees. Mahiro uses the gun to fire shots at Natsumura as he steps out but doesn't catch fire. Yoshino saves him by attacking Natsumura and beckoning on Mahiro to assist. Mahiro informs Yoshino about the results of the ritual performed against Aika's killer. It turns out the culprit is from Hikaze's clan, which means they'd eventually have to fight the mages head-on to determine the culprit. Hikaze apologizes for her inability to have noticed when such an incident occurred, explaining that at the time she was still the head of the clan, while the boys took a train to their next destination, but Mahiro terms it fate instead, as he doesn't seem bothered by the strange connection to the clan. A bus suddenly makes a stop at the station where Mahiro and Yoshino alight. Yoshino recalls a bit of their childhood, and he realizes he and Mahiro never got the chance to bond the way the kids they came across were playing. Yoshino heads out of a temple with a little sack. He's amazed at how Hikaze could actually hide such in a temple, as it goes against some religions, but she claims to only believe in the Tree of Genesis. Yoshino notices a butterfly as he calls out to Mahiro. Hikaze becomes furious, as it means that Samon is attempting to summon another fruit without considering the risk involved in doing so in a short period of time. Yoshino goes after 2 elderly people who are trying to hide from the rain to warn them about the Black Iron Syndrome and protect them, since he possesses talismans. Yoshino tries to inform the elders about the disease, but they walk away, refusing to believe him. Mahiro reminds him that the result of the government's refusal to expose anything about the Black Iron Syndrome is that the ground begins to quake as another fruit emerges. Yoshino tries to save the kids from turning into a statue, but fails to do so as he gets entangled in the earthquake. Mahiro decides to enter an unknown house after not getting any response to the announcement of their presence. Yoshino tries to remind Mahiro that they're invading one's house without permission, but Mahiro brushes it off since the owners could have already been affected by the Black Iron Syndrome. Yoshino decides to prepare a meal to regain energy, while Mahiro finds a way to have another fruit. Mahiro keeps Yoshino company by conversing with him about his relationship with Mamahiro, which results in Yoshino explaining about their abnormal friendship, as Mahiro would always look down on others while in school, even though he's intelligent and from a wealthy background, which made everyone see him differently. An incident occurred in their 3rd grade, when Mahiro got into an accident while the police chased a mugger. Yoshino ended up being picked to represent the students by visiting the hospital with the teacher. Mahiro asked his teacher to get him a drink, and used the opportunity to request a favor from Yoshino, who refused at first as Mahiro informed him that his accident was intentional, asking him to help him regarding it. Mahiro mischievously grabs Yoshino closer and lies to their teacher about Yoshino's intentions to decide on the visit. Mahiro becomes amazed at Yoshino's ability to produce a lot of evidence in a short amount of time, as he even gives a full briefing about the culprit and his intentions, as Yoshino suspects the chauffeur who had a fight with Mahiro's father. The success in fishing out the culprit prompted his teacher to put him in charge of Mahiro as a guardian without Yoshino's permission. Mahiro interrupts Yoshino and Hakazi's discussion by joining in for dinner. Yoshino expresses his observations about how serene the environment has become because of the black iron syndrome as he lays to sleep beside Mahiro. Mahiro calls Hakazi carefree for falling asleep easily on them, but he ends up doing the same as Yoshino tries to ask him a question. Mahiro wakes up early to take a stroll while conversing with Hakazi, who becomes surprised as she overhears Mahiro actually paying to get a drink from a vending machine. Hakazi decides to ask Mahiro the same question she asked Yoshino about their friendship, but he ends up giving a very vague description of it. Mahiro rounds up his own side of his story by informing Hakazi about a time when Yoshino exposed his vicious side to Mahiro by painting him to be a nice person in a class presentation, which made people admire and try to get closer to him. Mahiro ends up visiting the spot where the kids they had seen earlier and drops his bottle of water before returning to the house. Hakazi heaves a deep sigh as he squats to check her record, only to realize she has been stranded on the island for months already. As she's getting fed up with her situation, she confirms something with the boys as they make their way to their next destination. Natsumura visits Salmon as he apologizes for involving him in the ritual, but Salmon interrupts him by reminding him of his suspicions regarding the boys finding out these, even if they're being protected by a barrier that prevents people from locating them on the outside. Simone becomes worried as Hakazi's plan to draw closer to their location threatens the ritual. Hakazi enlightened Yoshino and Mahiro about Simone and why he went through the trouble of trapping her on her island instead of eliminating her, which is because Salmon has decided to use her as insurance in case the rebirth of the tree or Exodus goes berserk, and the power becomes uncontrollable as she's the only one with the power to take down the tree of Exodus. But it would also mean Salmon and his members behind the evil plot would end up losing, making them ridicule of shame. Natsumura reminds Semon of Hakazi's preparation of powerful talismans for their plan, so he sends one of his men instead, Tetsuma, who also shares the same concern and decides to follow Hakazi to all locations that have her traces. Yoshino analyzes the situation of the Tree of Genesis and the Tree of Exodus, and suddenly feels uneasy as something seems wrong about the whole story about the tree and Princess Hakazi. Tetsuma sights the boys from a distance with his men as they arrive at an aquarium. Hakazi informs Mahiro and Yoshino to enter the aquarium to retrieve another set of talismans she hid there during a trip with the clan's children. Yoshino recollects a memory he has of Aika during one of their dates at the aquarium, but the fish seem to have become stuffed models instead because of the black iron syndrome. Mahiro isn't still aware of Aika's involvement with Yoshino, as Yoshino keeps quiet about it after finding the set of talismans hidden by Hakazi. Tetsuma suddenly appears with his men as they hold jeans in their hands, trying to apprehend Yoshino and Mahiro. Hakazi instructs Tetsuma not to hurt the boys, but he gives a condition not to hurt them only if they willingly follow him to Samon. Hakazi reminds Tetsuma about the clan's betrayal of her and the Tree of Genesis, as they're doing the opposite of their purpose. Mahiro refuses to go with Tetsuma and the men as he tries to attack Tetsuma, but is brought down by chains. Yoshino also uses magic to bump a bony structure as it goes apart, sending its bones to cause damage while using the opportunity to escape. Tetsuma yells in anger at his men, ordering them to capture the boys before they escape. Mahiro and Yoshino end up by the stairs as they flee from their abductors. Yoshino watches his dolphin-like talisman turn into ashes, which brings him back to the memory of the time with Aika, when she once gifted him a necklace whose pendant was a dolphin. Yoshino refuses to believe such coincidences have any link to each other. Hakazi briefs Mahiro about Tetsuma's personality, as he's someone who's intelligent but hates her for being protected by the Tree of Genesis for several reasons. Mahiro requests that Yoshino act as bait to lure Tetsuma and his men, as he considers trying out the trick Yoshino previously used to trick the men, which led to their escape. Yoshino lures Tetsuma and his men to cause one of the aquariums to explode and threatens to electrify Tetsuma and his men if they don't let them be. Mahiro holds a wire that has electricity, and Hakazi warns Tetsuma to take heed to Mahiro's words, as he's someone who's capable of electrocuting them. Hakazi informs the boys of one last talisman remaining for them to recover, as it possesses special powers, but is in the custody of someone she trusts who is from their clan, but is currently in an unusual situation. Hakazi recalls her previous time in the clan, when Simone used 2 kids to lure Hakazi into a situation he deemed fit, but it backfires as she refuses to trust him or go with him. Natsumura reports back to Saman about Tetsuma's ability to capture the Genesis boys they seek. Her Mahiro and Yoshino reach the town by night as they begin their search mission. Hakazi warns them not to reveal her current situation to her trusted person, Junichiro, in order not to disturb him, and just simply retrieve the talisman. At the door, A young man opens it, asking them whom they seek. Junichiro finally permits them into his apartment after requesting a password. Yoshino observes how Junichiro is unusually calm as he notices a Buddhist altar in the apartment. Junichiro hands over a briefcase to Yoshino, containing the talisman, asking them about their interest in lighting incense to honor Hakazi's death. Hakazi yells in fury, and as she's aware that Simone is the only one capable of such an act, Junichiro shocks them even more by confirming the existence of proof that Hakazi had died on an island next to a barrel. Junichiro continues his story of how he heard the news from Simone and some others, which prompted him to return to the Kurasib family manor, only for Simone to explain how he had induced Hakazi to sleep to put her in a barrel, which resulted in her death. Simone showed a skeleton, claiming it to belong to Hakazi. Mahiro expresses his disappointment in Junichiro's identification of Hakazi just by looking at a skeleton, but he tells them his reasons for believing. Junichiro was given the role of handling Hakazi's memorial service by Salmon. As he informs him of his plot to revive the Tree of Exodus, Junichiro allows the boys to take away the briefcase without any intriguing questions. Mahiro inquires from Hakazi about Junichiro's history. Hakazi reveals to Mahiro that Junichiro is one who was adopted into the clan, as he had lost his parents at a very young age, and wasn't given any real power or ability to use magic. Hakazi ponders why Junichiro had chosen to believe Simone's claims about her death, but even with their separate perspectives, they are unable to arrive at a conclusion. No faces the window only to notice butterflies, and immediately alert Mahiro, and the bus begins to go berserk, as the ground quakes again after another fruit had emerged. Junichiro runs out of his apartment as he finally sees what the fruit of the Exodus resembles. He takes a step further and notices a body turning into a statue, but a voice suddenly startles him. Fear rushes through the spine of the bus driver as he observes different humans like him lay helplessly as a statue. Mahiro orders the bus driver to continue driving, else they won't be able to escape the area. Mahiro confirms Simone's impatience regarding the rebirth of the Tree of Exodus and receives permission from Hakazi to head to Simone's location. Natsumura visits Junichiro. Junichiro assures him of his safety as a talisman, which had been given to him by a leader protects him. Natsumura proceeds requesting him to drop his neutrality and join Simone's side, but he refuses, saying he's still on Hakazi's side, which prompts Natsumura to use force but ends up on the ground in the twinkle of an eye after Junichiro warns him. Natsumura tries to understand if Junichiro used magic on him or not, and Junichiro looks to the sky, pondering if Mahiro and Yoshino is knowledgeable about the fact that it's actually called the Tree of Genesis and Hakazi, and not the Tree of Exodus, which is most likely to cause more damage. Mahiro and Yoshino continue their journey by foot. As the bus develops fault, Mahiro warns the driver not to return to the city, else he would also end up as a medal. Mahiro asks Yoshino if he was ever aware about the existence of a rumor about his sister Aika being in a relationship, but he declines. Mahiro opens the briefcase only to find guns held with chains. Hakazi explains that magic is being made stronger when a lethal weapon is being offered to the Tree of Genesis as offering. Mahiro suddenly alerts Yoshino about them being surrounded, requesting him to prepare to fight, but they're being attacked by gunmen, who hits Mahiro, making him lose consciousness. Yamamoto drives Yoshino as she asks him if he feels guilty about sharing a secret deal with Yamamoto without his knowledge, but he declines as there's a bigger secret he's keeping. Yamamoto reveals to Yoshino about her being aware of the fact that Aika and Mahiro are siblings but not related by blood. Hakazi's repeated voice awakens him from unconsciousness as he runs to find Yoshino in worry. Leaving behind the doll and briefcase, Yamamoto informs Yoshino about her desire for him to meet someone before heading to their actual destination. Yoshino steps into an armored car as Yamamoto introduces him to Hayakawa Takumi, who's an assistant director of the Black Iron Syndrome Countermeasures Force, a force created secretly, as he has a link to someone from the clan created to prepare for circumstances relating to magic. Takumi reveals their plan to wage a war against the mages. Yoshino hands over some talismans to Yamamoto in exchange for some items he requested for, including her gun. Yamamoto feels excited as she would finally be able to use magic like the mages. Takumi unfolds their plans to Yoshino as they plan on attacking the mages in 2 days, but a situation interrupts their discussion as Mahiro appears panting and staring furiously at the soldiers. Mahiro begins to attack the soldiers as they obstruct him from seeing Yoshino. Yamamoto's armored vehicle begins to move as they retreat. Since they had given Mahiro the impression that Yoshino was kidnapped, Yoshino jumps out of the vehicle to meet Mahiro, while Takumi orders the soldier to retreat. Yoshino wonders why Mahiro doesn't have any suspicions towards him, and scolds Mahiro for leaving behind the briefcase as they return to retrieve it. A quick recall to when Aika was alive. Mahiro seems to be uneasy around Aika, as he orders her not start a relationship with anyone till he decides what to do with her, as she's different from the kind of girls he dates, but still is confused about his deep interest in her. Yoshino uses tape to protect them from cold, as he asks Mahiro about Hikaze as she's been quiet for a while. Mahiro informs him about Hikaze's break to gather strength before their battle against Samon. Yoshino hands over a blanket to Mahiro as they prepare to sleep. Yoshino wonders what would become of Mahiro after he has finally hit his goal, which is getting his revenge. But Mahiro disrupts his thoughts as he reminds him of his reduction in the way he pays attention to his cell phone. Yoshino remembers a time with Aika when she unexpectedly pops the question about their first kiss in the library, which causes Yoshino to feel shocked. Aika asks Yoshino about a location which he would like for them to have their first kiss, as it had to have a special significance, but he declines, which leads to Aika suggesting a summer house for them to have the first kiss, but he'd have to spend an entire week with Mahiro and his family. Yoshino picks up his phone to find a call from Mahiro requesting his presence as he escorts Aika home. Yoshino joins Mahiro only to realize that he set him up with some girls to hang out and tries to escape it, but fails. Mahiro returns home and discusses his outing with Yoshino to Aika, but she gives him a spiteful lecture about Yoshino and his personality, asks Mahiro to treat Yoshino well, as he's one who would stick out for Mahiro no matter the circumstances. Mahiro groans loudly, as noises from armored vehicles interferes with his sleep. He reluctantly asks Yoshino what it is like to actually date a person one likes, as he has always been used to girls coming after him, and not the other way round. But he gives an indirect reply to the question. Mahiro admits his interest in stars while he admires them. Yoshino wonders if Mahiro would ever realize his feelings towards Aika was more than being mutual or siblings, as he would always act restless around her, and also unable to touch her too. Back at the summer house with Mahiro, when Aika had invited Yoshino over for them to have their first kiss behind Mahiro's back, Mahiro is still unaware about the truth of the situation, as Aika bombards Yoshino with chores on his arrival at the summer house, and concludes that Aika unnecessarily hated Yoshino. Yoshino gets a text from his girlfriend Aika while trying to grill, asking him to meet her secretly at the backyard after dinner. Yoshino joins Aika but pauses to admire the stars in the sky while they discuss its beauty. Places her hand on Yoshino's cheek as he does the same, leaning closer to her for a kiss only for Mahiro's voice to obstruct them, causing them to freeze in shock as they hear him trying to locate their whereabouts. Mahiro finally locates them, suggesting that they all play some cards. Yoshino comes up with a quick excuse as Mahiro questions them about their motive for being alone at the backyard. Aika whispers some words to Yoshino as he follows Mahiro back into the summer house. Yoshino and Mahiro retire to bed after their card game, as Mahiro warns Yoshino to be wary of Aika, as she always plots evil, and his inability to predict her most times. Yoshino spends the early hours of his next morning with Aika, as they take a ride along sunflowers, but still doesn't end up getting the kiss they had planned for due to Yoshino's inability to lead like a man. Yoshino awakes from his sleep as Mahiro alerts him to prepare for their battle. As the time had come, Yoshino freezes in fear as Mahiro suddenly points the gun at him, uttering strange words about talisman and magic, but shakes it off as he assures Yoshino of only making a joke. Salmon observes from a distance the emergence of troops from the army heading their way, as he didn't expect they'd arrive so quickly. Samon holds his sword anticipating how the day's event would turn out, either in the princess's favor or theirs. Hikaze instructs Mahiro and Yoshino about a particular amount of talisman needed to break Samon's barrier to penetrate into his territory. Mahiro prepares his weapon as he ushers Yoshino for them to proceed on finding Aika's killer. Activity in the armed forces increases as it draws nearer for them to attack the mages, as each one confirms their roles and weapons. Yamamoto orders the attack to begin as missiles from helicopters, ships, and armored vehicles belonging to the military are being fired to break Samon's barrier. Samon instructs Tetsuma to be in charge of countering the army's attack. He further orders them to proceed with the revival ritual, with the goal of also protecting the Tree of Exodus at all costs. Salmon finally decides to take off the barrier's camouflage, as there's no need for them to hide since they've been discovered together with the Tree or Exodus's existence. While the soldiers change their target after sighting the Tree of Exodus, one of Samon's guard reports to him about someone trying to meddle with their barrier to gain access into the land. The talisman wears off after Mahiro and Yoshino steps into the barrier and reports back to Hikaze. Hikaze instructs them to head immediately to the Tree of Exodus without hesitation. As Samon is already aware of their arrival, the army begins to panic after realizing the unproductive efforts of their ammunitions against the barrier. Tetsuma instructs the members to ignore the attacks of the military and solely concentrates on their chance channels his concern towards the military, as he realizes that sustaining any form of damage would result to an hindrance of them successfully controlling the revival of the Tree of the Exodus. Mahiro and Yoshino suddenly stops, as a pile of rocks prevents them from moving forward. Salmon appears, as they notice a barrel by the top of the obstruction. Hakazi instructs them to move forward, so that her voice would be audible enough for Salmon to hear. Salmon begins with a formal introduction, and requests the boy of their names, but Mahiro shuns him, permitting Hakazi to express her thoughts. Hakazi instructs Samon to surrender before she unleashes her magic through the weapon which Mahiro possesses, as it definitely interrupts Samon's plans, but he refuses by saying his side of his story to Mahiro and Yoshino about the Tree of Genesis actually being behind the Black Iron Syndrome and not the Tree of Exodus. Yoshino stares in confusion as he struggles to understand Samon's explanations. Junichiro heads towards the clan, as he notices the military trying to destroy the barrier, and speaks out loud about the current world having to end up in destruction for the Tree of Genesis's true form to be unleashed. Yoshino finally deduces what felt off during the exposure to the usefulness of the magic the Tree of Genesis offered, as it can destroy just as much as it can also protect the world, and also wonders if the army is aware that their attack can also lead to the destruction of the world. Hakazi continues arguing with Samon about his theory of the Tree of Genesis being wrong. Samon suddenly pushes the question to Mahiro and Yoshino about their decision to either side with the princess or listen to his explanations. Yoshino develops doubts about Samon and Hakazi, as he realizes that they're the ones who's more knowledgeable about magic-related discussions, and wonders why they're being dragged into it. Mahiro expresses his nonchalant view about all that has been said, as it doesn't relate to his goal in any way, and orders Samon to retrieve Hakazi for her to find out what she owes him. Mahiro's attitude towards Samon and Hakazi's argument bothers Samon, being his first time meeting someone with such personality. Hakazi does a quick analysis about Aika's death, as she imagines if Mahiro would ever have sided with her if it wasn't for his revenge, or if it's just fate that everything is happening in her favor. Yoshino concludes that the fate of the world should be decided by Mahiro's decision to either pull the trigger of believe Samon, as he tries talking things out with Mahiro by bringing up a statement made by Mahiro about saving the world. But Mahiro doesn't seem to care whether the world ends up in destruction or not, as his hate for the world began when it took Aika's life and caused him pain. Tetsuma orders Natsumura to destroy some of the military's vehicles to hold them down for a while, as they've been able to destroy the first layer of the barrier. Simon asks Mahiro about his actions if he discovers that Hakazi would eventually be unable to grant his wish by claiming to them of her death, and proceeds by uttering an incantation which unveils a skeleton from the barrel. After a few interrogatory questions which Salmon asks Hakazi, they realize after her answers, and decide to reveal to her that 2 years had passed by, and not 4 months which she had spent on the island. Hakazi stands in the rain shocked as she struggles to digest the sudden news about her existence. Salmon explains to Hakazi that her world is actually 2 years in the past, which means she had traveled back in time. One of the soldiers notices a person emerging from the smokes and approaching them, which turns out to be Natsumura. Mahiro requests Samon to confirm about his statement regarding them having to have been in communication with an Hakazi from 2 years back. Things slowly made more sense to each of them. As they give Samon's words a deep thought, Hakazi falls to the ground as she reminds him of possible consequences of his actions, but he replies her by confirming to her that Junichiro had already confirmed that the supposed skeleton belonged to Hakazi. Hakazi notices that truly it appeared strange when the doll she had sent in a bottle got to Japan so quickly, considering the position of the ocean. Samon informs Hakazi to accept defeat as she's at loss in her current situation. Natsumura calculates his proximity to get to the military's vehicle and manages to reach it after surviving several shots, which attempted to destroy his defensive barrier. Natsumura offers one of the armored tanks to the Tree of Genesis as it suddenly vanishes, giving him more power in return strong enough to create another defensive barrier. The soldiers panic even more after observing their inability to cause Natsumura injury. Samon sends Mahiro and Yoshino away after their discovery, denying them permission. In using their magic, he asks them to depart, leaving behind their remaining talismans. Yoshino decides to obey, but not Mahiro, as he informs Samon of his decision to make use of the weapon he possesses, with or without Hakazi being alive or dead. Samon clenches his teeth in anger as Mahiro keeps claiming not to be bothered about the world, and suggests that he grants his wish instead by cutting a deal. Yoshino pities Hakazi as he watches Mahiro switch sides without feeling any form of fear or resentment. Samon calmly ponders on his next move as Mahiro demands an immediate answer from him regarding his proposal. Samon inquires from Mahiro the details of his wish. Mahiro bluntly jumps to the part where the supposed killer is suspected to be from their clan. Samon reaches for his doll as he instructs Tetsuma to find out about Mahiro's wish immediately, Yoshino becomes amazed at Mahiro's decision to push forward with his decision, despite all that had occurred to them in such a short time, and wonders what to do about the situation. Yoshino picks up the doll and informs Hikaze about the deal between Samon and Mahiro, which has been finalized. Hikaze expresses her decision to give up as every possibility and hope which she had already been tainted with doubts. But Yoshino encourages her about not giving up easily and attempts to quote one of Aika's sayings, but pauses as he recollects a memory of both of them discussing about something regarding he and Mahiro in a fight because of her, as it's somehow linked to a tale by Hamlet. Yoshino adds up all he suddenly discovers, as he thinks of a way to actually end it without the situation leading into tragedy, hoping that everything is just simply a coincidence. Yoshino decides to give it a trial by following Aika's tale, as he alerts Mahiro attacking him before he gives a reply using tear gas. Samon also decides to do something for things not to become more uncertain, which results to him wielding his sword as he utters a chant, and joins them in the fight. Mahiro charges at Samon, ordering him not to lay a finger or Yoshino. Before Mahiro and Salmon understood their situation, Yoshino makes his way to the position in which Salmon had been standing since they arrived. Natsumura makes his way to another armored tank to destroy, but is obstructed by Yamamoto as she uses magic to stop him. Mahiro demands an explanation from Yoshino regarding his actions, as Yoshino reminds him about their purpose of visiting the clan, which is to revenge, but doesn't sound reasonable if it's at the cost of Hikaze's life. Yoshino announces his desire to prove to Mahiro of the possibility to reclaim Hikaze from the island, and also still achieving their purpose. Yoshino informs Mahiro of his willingness to reveal Aika's boyfriend to him, only if he returns to Hikaze's side. Mahiro's hands begin to tremble as he realizes he's faced with an irresistible offer, but only on Yoshino's terms. Samon yells at Mahiro for agreeing to Yoshino's terms just because of Aika's boyfriend. Yoshino presents his theory to Mahiro and Samon about the Tree of Genesis, which made the world and its logic with the responsibility of protecting Hikaze, but he reminds Mahiro that their coming thus far has only been successful because of Mahiro's decision to assist Hikaze, which means the Tree of Genesis is working in her favor, and also counters Samon's theory about a time shift in Hikaze's existence. Mahiro realizes from Yoshino's theory that truly Samon would have aware of their existence if he knew about the death of Hikaze, but failed to, and only desires to prove to the world that his theories are correct. Yamamoto demands Natsumura to give her an introduction of himself, but he refuses as they charges at each other. Takumi hopes Yamamoto becomes successful in buying them enough time before more forces arrive to assist them. Samon becomes dumbfounded as Yoshino figures out his actual gambit against the Princess Hikaze, knowing fully well of his inability to defeat her due her unbeatable power, which she possesses courtesy of the Tree of Genesis. Salmon smirks as he notices that Yoshino hasn't been able to actually figure out everything except just the important part, which prompts him to ask Yoshino about how they can truly retrieve Hikaze from the deserted island, as it's impossible to break through the ultimate prison of time. Mahiro falls into Samon's trap as he begins to think just the way he had plotted. Actually way to break through the prison. Samon begins to feel confident once again, as he thinks Yoshino won't be able to figure it out easily, as it took the clan 3 generations to figure it. But Yoshino destroys his confidence by explaining that time prison is actually an illusion, which they're being tricked into believing, so as not to cause time paradox. Hikaze makes a confirmation that she had been keeping tabs about how many days had passed, but Yoshino questions her about also considering the time it took to get her stranded, and also brought up the suggestion about what if the truth is that she had been induced with sleep for 2 years, then was placed in a barrel and dumped on that island. Yoshino proceeds with his theory about the supposed skeleton acting as props to Samon's plot, since they had 2 years to prepare such deceit. Mahiro picks up his weapon as he aims to activate the talisman, leaving Samon no choice but to retrieve Hikaze himself. Samon pleads with Mahiro to wait a little longer as the latter part of Yoshino's theory is wrong, but Yoshino instructs him to prove the existence of a time shift, else he'd be sticking with his theory. Samon's thoughts begin to bother him as he realizes that Yoshino's theory is wrong, but is also irrelevant, as the important thing is to prevent Mahiro from activating the talisman, which would lead him to returning Hikaze and portraying him as a loser. Yoshino feels a bit of relief as he watches Samon panic, and hopes he, Mahiro, and Hikaze develop the ability to combine their strength in making a final move. Yamamoto succeeds in buying enough time as she pauses on the arrival of more Air Force support. Tetsuma is being informed about the weak state of the barrier, which prompts him to instruct the clan members to redirect their power from the first 2 barriers and concentrate the power into the revival of the Tree of an Exodus, as speeding up the ritual is their only solution. Mahiro thinks about siding with Yoshino as his confusing theory seems acceptable. Samon realizes his last option is to prove the existence of the time shift, else his plots would be futile. He suddenly makes reference to the barrel saying, The barrel which resides with Hakazi on the island and the one which is currently with them are the same. So he instructs Yoshino to utter some words to Hakazi, for her to inscribe on the barrel with her, which would mean he is right if the words appear on the same barrel, which is the present day. Hakazi breaks a bottle as she prepares to receive the words for inscription. Yoshino moves to the bottom of the barrel and quietly exclaims before announcing to Simone and Mahiro about the words appearing just as he had said. Simone's confidence slowly regains its pace after proving to his audience the existence of a time shift. Junichiro suddenly appears, offering Natsumura a snack, asking him to stick around for a while after beating Yamamoto to a pulp. Hakazi assures Mahiro of devising a way to return, as it seems that Simone is trying to hide a secret, and that Yoshino's thinking is correct in some ways, but Mahiro insists on not being on anyone's side till Aika's killer is found, but would only assist in breaking through the time prison, which leaves Simone dumbfounded and disorganized, as he struggles to believe that he fell into Yoshino's trap without realizing. Yoshino confirms the establishment of the possibility of retrieving Hakazi, and all that is left is to source for the means. Yoshino begins sourcing for the means by asking Hakazi her theory, their ability to communicate through the dolls, which leads her to explain how one can be created through a specific technique, as the possibility increases only when the structure becomes more complicated. Yoshino uses Hakazi's theory to conclude that they'd have to find two unusual but similar objects on the island, and their current location with some portion of magic added to it. Mahiro stands up in excitement as he refers to the perfect example to use for their theory, which is the full skeleton which Salmon claims to belong to Hakazi. Salmon grovels as he admits within himself that truly, the skeleton is the key to breaking the prison of time. Junichiro offers Yamamoto a bottle of water, while commending her for the performance that she had put up to deceive Natsumura. Yamamoto curiously asks Junichiro if he is also a mage like the rest, but he declines, only describing himself as a regular student. Junichiro uses Yamamoto's boobs as his reason for interfering. As they had been bouncing all over, he requests Natsumura to use his strength in changing the situation if it displeases him. Yamamoto exclaims in surprise as she watches Natsumura fall to the ground within a twinkle of an eye. Junichiro explains to Yamamoto a quote which states that when a master attacks one with their specialty, the person ends up defeated before realizing. Natsumura decides to make a run for it by tactically retreating, since he's unable to defeat Junichiro, but Junichiro prevents him from retreating. Yamamoto feels relief as things begin to work in her favor. Mahiro and the group continue with ideas to make their plans productive, as their current resort is for Hakazi to use magic to transfer her body into the skeleton in the present age. But Hakazi reminds them that a tangible offering would have to be offered, and the island currently possesses none. Simon interrupts their discussions by asking to permission to be listened to. Things become rogue for the military, as the emergence of other fruits leads to more losses for the force as soldiers become infected with the Black Iron Syndrome. Salmon confirms that their method of retrieval is correct, as he had previously prepared an offering leaving it on the island, as a storm intervened in his plans, but adds another instance to their ideas. As it stems doubts all of a sudden, Samon explains to them that they are only part of the Tree of Genesis's plans, as everything which has been occurring isn't just a coincidence, and Aika's killer is the Tree of Genesis, who manipulated them using logic. Salmon requests Mahiro to give his explanation some thoughts, as his true enemy is the tree and not the clan. Hakazi ponders, as she also has her suspicions about the tree killing Aika for her sake, as the murder occurred while she was at the island, and would only make more sense. Mahiro is left to decide, as Simone suggests he join forces with the clan in bringing down the Tree of Genesis, but Yoshino objects to it, claiming it to have been the result of the actions of the members of the clan. Yoshino tries to stop Mahiro from refusing to give Hakazi ample time to find the offering that Simone had hidden on the island, as she determines to find it to be able to atone for her sins, in the event of her being the one behind Aika's death. Yamamoto starts to bleed as a result of the injury gotten from the beatings. Junichiro orders Natsumura to heal her from her injuries, reminding him of the consequences his actions would attract if he hadn't saved her, as it defies the laws of the Tree of Genesis. Junichiro further explains that it can only be resolved after the culprit performs a ritual asking the Tree of Genesis with the purpose of atonement. One of the members of the clan reports back to Tetsuma regarding Aika's investigation, and Hakazi mentions the existence of ritual exemption to any members of the clan to Mahiro and Yoshino. Simon goes back and forth with Hakazi about Aika's killer, trying to convince Mahiro. Mahiro analyzes Simone's actual plan for Yoshino and Hakazi, as he simply created a division between them so he could slow down Hakazi's victory and concentrate on reviving the Tree of Exodus. Mahiro decides to consider siding with Samon as he instructs him to present the kill, but Tetsuma explains that it's impossible as no one from the clan is behind the murder. Mahiro begins to be impatient as he demands a clearer explanation for the sudden confusion. Hikaze explains that the only logical reason she can come up with is the existence of a mage of the Tree of Exodus. Passengers boarding a fleet of ship begins to panic as they watch a huge tree emerge from the ocean. Hikaze continues in her search for the hidden offering, while Simon tries to understand the situation with Mahiro and Yoshino. But Mahiro doesn't seem to care about the deep details of whether the existence of Mage of Exodus exists or not, as he's more concerned about a concrete conclusion with evidence. Salmon's theory backfires at him, as Mahiro points his gun at him, pinning down as one of the people responsible for Aika's death, as he has been amongst the major people supporting the revival of the Tree of the Exodus. Takumi's men make a report about a sudden occurrence going on, which is that a newly observed tree has been spotted absorbing metallized life forms. Another one suffers about the observed tree turning all humans and man-made objects into ash suddenly. Takumi realizes that the plant-like object is devouring civilization, and Yamamoto confirms from Junichiro as she watches the shadow of the Tree of Genesis emerge from the ground. Yoshino decides that their next plan is to make Samon confess about the offering's hidden location, since his defeat had already been decided, but he also worries about Mahiro, who stays mute, as he's yet to respond with a move or a conclusion. Different thoughts and ideas about the recent developments bother Mahiro as he carefully ponders about his next move, as a lot of critical factors are involved, and one wrong step could hinder him from finding Aika's killer. Simon hopes Mahiro continues to hold on to the talisman without firing it, since his calculations show that it'd take Hikaze about an hour to find the offering, which would be too late, as the Tree of Exodus would have been revived by then, providing nothing interferes with it. Hikaze decides to find the offering by herself, without seeking help from the Tree of Genesis, but pauses after a while, as restlessness creeps in about her inability to have found the offering already, but suddenly notices a sparkle appear in the sky. Hikaze increases her pace as she runs in the direction of her discovery, hoping it isn't what she assumes it to be, and finally stops panting as she fearfully stares at the sight of a missile right where her barrel had been. Hikaze touches the missile in disappointment, as she concludes that the Tree of Genesis sent another missile due to her inability to find the offering that Samson hid. Yoshino curiously asks Hikaze if something wrong came up, but she informs him about her discovery of the offering, instructing him to place the doll closer to the skeleton for her to determine the actual location. Hikaze resolves to find Aika's killer, with or without help from the Tree of Genesis, and also not betray Mahiro and Yoshino, who defended her. Hikaze places her hands on the missile, chanting the required incantation. A bright light suddenly envelops her body, teleporting her into the future. Mahiro, Yoshino, and Samon freeze in astonishment and awe, as a bright light also envelops the skeleton in the present day, which means that the time shift has been broken. Hikaze appears as the dust slowly fades away, while she boldly makes a formal introduction, not because she also appears naked. Yoshino immediately uses his jacket to cover her naked body, while she touches his cheeks, expressing her surprise regarding his young looks and calling him a villain. Yoshino tries to decline being one, but Hikaze takes out a gun that is in his pocket, confirming her statement to be true. Hikaze faces Samon, ordering him to obey her as she desires no explanation from him, and also gives her word to Mahiro about presenting him with Aika's killer, even if the Tree of Genesis is behind it, asking him to accept the surrounding circumstances. Mahiro accepts her deal and proceeds to ask Yoshino about Aika's boyfriend, only for them to experience an earthquake, as Tetsuma reports to Samon about the Tree of Genesis's sudden initiation of an assault on them leading to a penetration of their barrier. Junichiro informs Natsumura of a storm arising from their present predicament. Tetsuma makes another report of the Tree of Exodus suddenly going berserk to attack the Tree of Genesis. Hikaze demands a talisman from Mahiro for her to present as an offering to provide them a defense that will strengthen the barrier, but a sudden storm attacks them, eliminating both Mahiro and Yoshino. Hikaze orders Samon to use magic to heal Mahiro while she does the same to Yoshino. Natsumura finally reveals his name to Yamamoto as his barrier begins to lose its strength. The world begins to uproar into destruction as the Tree of Genesis takes its course, leaving Hikaze to wonder what the tree wishes for her. Mahiro wakes from a nightmare where he lies on snow and butterflies perch on his blood and his face. He is surprised to see Aika, and he decides he is still dreaming as Aika is already dead. Aika quotes some lines from The Tempest and they talk about the book. Mahiro says it is about revenge, so it must end in tragedy, as only sadness counters sadness. Mahiro wakes on the snow again. Yoshino appears in the form of a kid and asks Mahiro if he made the journey just to end it in tragedy. Mahiro then remembers they are on a journey to save the world. He recollects when he and Yoshino visit Aika's grave, and he promises to do whatever it takes for everything about her death to make sense again. He then remembers the first time Yoshino heard Hakazi's voice through the doll, and they talked about her helping Mahiro find his sister's killer. Mahiro reminisces about the Kusaribi clan. They want to revive the Tree of Exodus, but the princess, Hakazi, is the only one against the plan, and she is forced out of the clan. To revive the tree, they needed to gather its fruits around Japan, but its fruit was a harbinger of the Black Iron Syndrome that killed a lot of people. Mahiro does not care about all these. He makes a deal with Hakazi to help her save the world, only if she helps him find Aika's killer. Mahiro remembers seeing Yoshino after sending him off. They work together, and their journey to save the world begins. How they fight against different mages from the Kusaribe clan, and proceed to meet Simone. Simone tries to confuse them with several means, and Mahiro is swayed, easily saying his priority is to find his sister's killer. But with Yoshino's help, Hakaze later escapes from the desolate island. After saving it, Princess, the Tree of Genesis, in its fight against the Tree of Exodus, mortally injures Mahiro and Yoshino. Mahiro wakes in the room with Aika again, wondering if he is dead. She tells him he isn't, as he has said himself that this story does not end in tragedy. He wakes up on a bed, asking himself if he is dreaming again. Yoshino, as a kid, sits beside him reading a book, and Mahiro drags him and asks him who Aika's boyfriend is, but Yoshino asks him if he does not want to know what happened next. Yoshino tells him that all the soldiers died and the Tree of Genesis swallowed them up. It then spread to the whole world and swallowed all the cities and the people. Then armies worldwide went to fight it, but none of them returned, as the tree swallowed anything that opposes it. He also tells Mahiro that the world population has decreased from 6 billion to 4 billion. Yoshino continues to explain that the Tree of Genesis did not only swallow those that opposed it, but any area affected by hardship and rebellion. In cities with the mere intentions of war, the tree sensed that and appears so no one starts war anymore. The tree also monitors minor crimes as it appears to robbers and rebels, and the world is now more peaceful. The tree has also turned deserts into forests and polluted seas turn to normal. Soon they are on the brink of resolving water and food shortages in the world. The Tree of Exodus also stopped growing and their fighting ceased. Mahiro says that although the world is saved without his help, he still does not understand the logic. Yoshino asks him if he wants to end tragedy with tragedy, and won't be satisfied until he gets his revenge. Mahiro, on the day of Aika's death, enters the house wondering if he will have to listen to her talk crazy again. He enters her room and finds her dead. He touches her skin, and even knowing how cold she is, he still couldn't believe she is dead. He falls to the ground and weeps. Mahiro wakes up for real this time, and Salmon enters. He tells Mahiro he has been asleep for a month, and although he could have woken him, he made him sleep with magic. Salmon opens the curtains, and Mahiro sees the tree across the street. He asks about Yoshino, but Salmon says he is healthy and intelligent than Mahiro. Mahiro then asks why Simone kept him alive, but Simone asks him if he could kill Yoshino. Salmon asks Mahiro if he could kill Yoshino. He smiles and answers Samon that it is not even a funny joke. He tells Mahiro to get dressed so he will explain everything to him and tells him the date, which is January 1st. Happy New Year. Samon tells Mahiro that Hakazi is traveling to various places to see the effect of the Tree of Genesis, and she chose only Yoshino to go with her, and it is becoming a serious problem. He takes him to a room where Yamamoto, Natsumura, and Takumi are. They sit to eat as Yamamoto introduces Takumi to Mahiro, who is now a bureaucrat in charge of assembling a statistical report on the Black Iron Syndrome, as he was demoted after the incident with the Tree of Genesis. Yamamoto says all Takumi can do for now is spread rumors about the Mage of Exodus. Simone then tells Mahiro they are searching for the Mage in case he exists, and wants to find him first before there is further chaos. The Mage of Exodus should be careful around Mahiro. Yoshino and Hakazi are at the Fuwa gravesite. She asks him what kind of person Aika was, and if she was also a difficult person like Mahiro. She then tells Yoshino to introduce her to Aika's boyfriend, as she would like to know who would secretly date Aika, and the person has no self-preservation. Well, he is right in front of you. A young guy, Hanamura, walks along the street, looking downcast. He wonders if he will be able to save the Tree of Exodus. He makes a red orb, still wondering if his girlfriend will come back to him if he can do that. Meanwhile, Yoshino and Hakazi walk around the city he grew up in. He notices she fears the Tree of Genesis, so he tells her it isn't her fault, as no one could have predicted what would happen. She tells him he is saying that because he was unconscious when it all happened, the tree caused so much havoc and still cleared everything within a week. She feels so unsure, because only a portion of the tree is awake, and wonders what will happen if it is fully awake. This is getting intense. Samon tells Mahiro that Hakaze has a crush on Yoshino. Although she might have not figured it out, Mahiro asks how that leads to killing Yoshino, and Samon explains that Hakaze is confused about what to do with both the Tree of Genesis and Exodus, but whatever decision she makes, Yoshino will be a deciding factor. Hakaze tells Yoshino to wait for her as she goes to use the restroom. Hanamura approaches Yoshino and asks him for directions to Mount Fuji. Hakaze comes out of the restroom and kicks Hanamura. Hanamura explains to them that he needs to go to Mount Fuji, where the Tree of Exodus is, as he believes he is the Mage of Exodus. He shows them he can make orbs as he says this. They all go to eat at a restaurant where Hakaze questions Hanamura. He explains that he first noticed his power a year ago, and it grew as the Tree of Exodus emerged. Hakaze tells him she is also a mage, but of the Tree of Genesis, and that they should spar. Samon, Takumi, and Mahiro talk about Yoshino, and Yamamoto watches them. Yoshino does not know Hakaze has feelings for him, and has no idea that he holds the fate of the world. But he has the tendency to sacrifice someone when he believes in something, so they want Mahiro to help prevent that. Mahiro asks about Yoshino's girlfriend. Takumi says he heard she is safe, but he does not know where she is. Mahiro tells them he will help Toshino if they help him find Aika's killer. Hakaze, Yoshino, and Shane Mira are on a field. She tells Yoshino that she needs to see Hanamura use magic to know how strong he is. Hakaze creates a barrier around she and Yoshino. She then uses it to fight Hanamura, who does not fight back but looks scared and lost. Soon he uses defensive spell and also fight back. After sparring with magic for a while, Hanamura cuts off Hakaze's same. Hanamura feels disturbed as he does not mean to harm her. Hakaze had cast a regeneration spell on her arm earlier, so her arm regrow. She then concludes that Hanamura is the Mage of Exodus, but he does not have the heart of the mage as he is not a killer. Salmon and Takumi believe Yoshino is the Mage of Exodus. They conclude that if he is truly the mage, then he is competent at his work. As he can hinder the growth of the Tree of Genesis, Yamamoto receives a call and tells them, Yoshino just told her they have found the Mage of Exodus. Samon and Mahiro go to the market to get supplies for everyone. Mahiro tells Samon he knows he is sent out to keep him away from the Mage of Exodus the others are bringing to the house. Yamamoto and Natsumura take Hanamura to one of the branches of the Tree of Genesis. She introduces herself and Natsumura to him and helps him relax. Hanamura shows Natsumura and Yamamoto how he uses his power. Natsumura feels disturbed as he realizes Hanamura does not need to offer any offering to use magic. He also does not feel physically or emotionally exhausted after using magic. Natsumura asks Hanamura how accurately he can attack an enemy. Hanamura moves towards the tree and touches it. Soon the tree glows red and vanishes, leaving a deep hole. Whoa, what just happened? They all looked shocked, and Yamamoto quickly dragged Hanamura into the car, and they sped off. Yamamoto, Samon, Mahiro, and Hanamura sit to eat. Mahiro interrogates Hanamura about Aika's murder. Hanamura is shocked and surprised as he isn't expecting that. Mahiro asks him where he was on the day of Aika's death. He says after using magic to search for the killer, their prime suspect is the Mage of Exodus. Hanamura looks confused at first, but later remembers. He tells them he went out with his girlfriend Yu, and he explains that he calls her Yu because her skin is as white as snow. They ask him if they can confirm from Yu if they were together on that date, but Hanamura refuses, saying the situation is too weird, and he do not know what type of danger they will be in, so he does not want to drag Yu into that, and also, Yu recently dumped him, so it will be awkward, as she won't reply to his calls or texts. Mahiro fumes that Hanamura could not even meet with Yu to begin with. He then concludes that he will ask Hanamura's body instead. Mahiro tells Hanamura to use any means available to him, including magic, to push him to the ground. Hanamura says that he is the Mage of Exodus, and Mahiro tells him, although it will be bad if Hanamura kills him, but if he manages to do it, then he could have killed Aika too, and Yoshino and Hakaze would avenge him. Mahiro taunts him, saying his girlfriend probably left because he is so pathetic, and he is even starting to doubt if she was even his girlfriend. Samon also adds that even if she is real, he is sure the feelings were completely one-sided. Hanamura becomes angry and throws magic at Mahiro, but he misses. Kicks him again and tells him it is obvious he does not want to hit him, and that Hanamura should come for him like he wants to break a limb. Hanamura feels down as if he do not want to fight. Yoshino and Hakaze are at a park. Hakaze wonders how people can still come out to celebrate after everything that has happened, and it just seems wrong that they had no sense of danger, and it seems like the Tree of Genesis Jazz rewrote everyone's emotions. Yoshino tells her she is wrong, as there have always been situations that claim thousands of lives, but people still always moved on. Junichiro interrupts them and tells Yoshino rudely to buy coffee for him, and he leaves to buy it despite Hakaze's refusal. Junichiro asks Hakaze if she knows she is in love with Yoshino. After some days of fighting with Mahiro, Hanamura gets better but still feels reluctant to hurt him. Mahiro says he heard he was going to Mount Fuji to defeat the Tree of Genesis. Hanamura said he thought if he did that and saved the world, you will approve of him. Mahiro says he is doing all that for someone who dumped him, and Hanamura replies he does not want to hear that from someone who has a sister complex like Mahiro. Well, I guess the cat is out of the bag. Mahiro kicks Hanamura and shouts at him that he does not have a sister complex as he and Aika are not related by blood, so they might have been siblings legally, but they are not siblings. Hanamura looks at Mahiro and tells him he sounds like he is in love with Aika. Hakazi tells Junichiro he is wrong, and she would never consider a younger weakling as Yoshino a potential love interest, and Yoshino has a girlfriend. She says that although the fact that he has a girlfriend is a miracle, Yoshino is impressive in his way. She remembers how he kept a cool head at Mount Fuji when he was thinking of how to bring her back, but still he is young and has things he needs to work on. Hakazi blushingly continues to praise Yoshino. Junichiro smiles looking at her. He calls her attention to him and tells her she loves Yoshino. Takumi meets with Simon to show him some papers. Takumi says they know very little about the trees of Genesis and Exodus, and his plan will help them re-examine everything from square one. Simon agrees, but tells him he will not permit any unsupervised decision during the execution. They agree to call the princess even though they believe it will take time for her to accept their plan, but as they call Hakazi, she tells them to go ahead with whatever they want to do without even listening to their plan. Hakazi asks Junichiro what to do, as she does not plan to fall in love with Yoshino at all, and he tells her it is not what a person plans for. Junichiro says it is not a good idea for her to be in love with Yoshino as he has a girlfriend, and if Hakazi wishes for a relationship with Yoshino strongly enough, the Tree of Genesis would kill that girlfriend. Hakazi is troubled by Junichiro's words and is thinking about it when Yoshino tells her a spy has infiltrated the Kusaribe village. They are distracted by the news broadcast saying a branch of the Tree of Genesis has been marked for destruction by the self-named Mage of Exodus. A lot of people have gathered at the tree to see what will happen. Soon Natsumaru and Tetsuma arrive and fly around the tree, before Hanamura, using a grand gesture, descends and destroys the tree to the amazement of everyone. Hakazi tells Yoshino they are going back to the Kusaribe stronghold, as she needs to investigate the spy issue herself. Yamamoto tells Hanamura he did a good job, and they are going to other places to continue. Hanamura feels reluctant, but has no choice but to accept. Hakazi and Yoshino arrive back at the village and receive a warm welcome from the villagers. Some children, seeing Yoshino beside her, ask her if she got a boyfriend through magic. She calls them brats when a young girl calls her name. Hakazi calls the young girl Sana, and they all go to visit Sana's brother's grave. She explains to Yoshino that Sana's brother and Sana were very close, so when he died, she refused to come out of bed, but it seems she is better now as time has started healing her wound. Yamamoto and Tetsuma watch them from a distance by using a binocular. She tells Tetsuma she thinks Yoshino is more suited to be the Mage of Exodus than Hanamura. Hakazi and Yoshino listen to the villagers as they explain that a child complains of seeing a goat near the shrine. Hakazi says they should keep spreading the news about the ghost as it keeps the children safe. Hakazi and Yoshino decide to conduct their own investigation. They are walking on a suspension bridge, and Yoshino complains she is walking too fast as the bridge is not stable, but still hangs onto the bridge like a lifeline. Hakazi stretches her hand to him to hold him, but remembers it might make her feelings for him grow. So she withdraws her hand and continues walking. At the shrine, Hakazi tells Yoshino the intruder might be looking for ancient documents, but there are very few documents, as most of their knowledge about the Tree of Genesis is passed down through word of mouth. They sit somewhere, and Yoshino asks Hakazi if the worst-case scenario is they go up, if they are unable to find out who the spy is. She says she doesn't mind if it ends up as a ghost story, as long as everyone refrains from using magic. Yoshino says it is funny that mage children will be scared of ghosts. She says she is sure Yoshino believes only what he can see. Yoshino quotes from Hamlet and explains to her Eiji Yoshino remembers being with Aika, and she also quoted from Hamlet. She says she believes he is the type that will say he has never seen a ghost even if he had. She then asks him if he would like to see someone who has passed on even as a ghost. She asks even if she was the one. Yoshino and Hakazi overhear the villagers searching for Sana. Yoshino, Hakazi, and some villagers are searching for Sana when someone tells them the shrine is on fire. Tetsuma stops Yamamoto and Natsumaru from joining the others to help search for Sana. He tells them this is a good opportunity to find out if Yoshino is truly a Mage of Exodus. The suspension bridge that is used to cross to the shrine has been destroyed. The villagers see Sana with a strange man at the shrine on the other side of the bridge. Hakazi wonders why Sana came to the bridge after hearing stories about the ghost, and Yoshino tells her she might have come because of the ghost stories. Hakazi says they must save her no matter what, but the villagers remind her she told them not to use magic. She tries to insist there is no way to save Sana without using magic, but Yoshino quickly uses a chain to glide down the rope that was used for a pulley system and tells Hakazi he will distract the man from Sana and lead him away. As Yoshino glides down the rope, he reflects that Sana must have wanted to see her brother's ghost after hearing the stories. The rope cuts, and he almost falls, but he soon gets his footing back. Tetsuma and the others are still watching from afar. He says risking himself might be part of his plan as he has a talisman to help him. Yoshino separates the man from Sana and tells her to run away to the forest. The man hits him, and as they start to fight, the roof of the burning shrine collapses and almost falls on Yoshino. Hikaze quickly uses magic to protect Yoshino, and as the man tries to run off, Natsumaru and Tetsuma arrives and stops him. Hikaze runs to Yoshino and asks him how he feels. She feels bad when Yoshino says it looks like the spy found out about magic. She says that is not what she's concerned about. She hugs him, saying she was so worried. Tetsuma still insists that Yoshinoni's the Mage of Exodus as the princess has started to disregard the Tree of Genesis logic, all because of Yoshino. Yamamoto disagrees, saying she thinks Hikaze sees Yoshino differently, but she does not know how yet. Yamamoto is on a call with Takumi, who tells her the spy is from a government agency, and it might be a good opportunity for them that it is now confirmed that magic has been used. As they are talking, Yamamoto finds a plaque among the ruins of the shrine with a strange drawing of snakes on it. Some colleagues talk about Takumi, they say. Although he has been demoted after the death of all the soldiers under his command, it seems the Mage of Exodus's arrival is to his sole benefit. Takumi tells his boss that they need to resolve the issue with the trees, and as the only one with knowledge about magic in their organization, he is the only one that can do that. Hanamura, Yamamoto, and Natsumura travel around the world, destroying different branches of the Tree of Genesis. Yamamoto is happy that she had the chance to travel around, but Hanamura looks extremely exhausted. Yoshino and Hikaze are at a restaurant. He shows her a clip of Hanamura being praised by the people, and she says she now understands Simone's plan. She says the Tree of Genesis came like a dictator, and everyone had no choice but to accept it, but now there is a hero who is destroying the trees, and those that are against the tree can now speak up. They start eating, and Hikaze feels uncomfortable about eating with Yoshino while his girlfriend is out there. She wonders why he has not noticed that she has feelings for him, but later concludes that it must be because he is totally in love.